Kendall Mariah, it is so great to have you here on For Real. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm so excited to sit down with you and get to chat.
I'm so excited to be with you. I was just talking with you about how I found you, and your publicist is a delightful person, and she sent me some info about your book. And I would say the predominant color in all of the press release was pink, and you are wearing pink.
Yeah, as it would be in our house and our home. My husband's military, but he very much lives in kind of a Barbie world between my daughter and I. So
oh my gosh. Well, that makes me like him without even knowing him.
Yeah.
I actually want to start right there. I want to start with your actual life in this actual moment. You are a military wife, military family.
Yeah.
And this week has been very hard. We're recording during a week that has been very hard on military families. And so I'd wonder if you can say to us, what do you wish civilian families or civilian people knew?
I think the biggest thing is that we are caught in the middle. And we are caught in the middle a lot. 6 months ago, we were having the conversation about when the military wasn't getting paid back in the fall because of the budget. When elections come around, the military is used as a pawn. My husband's been in for 14 years now. And, he's been in service and has served with integrity and strength and loyalty with his soldiers, regardless of who was president and who was in office. And, the pendulum swings back and forth. But military families particularly are caught in the middle of all these situations. And it's a heavy burden to bear all the time. But when you have contentious seasons politically or economically, again, we're pawns, unfortunately, a lot of times in those conversations. And so, for my civilian friends and family, a lot of times it is just the acknowledgement of the suck. The Army talks about embracing the suck on the soldier side. But what I need as a spouse is you just acknowledging it, and not in a pity way. I don't want your pity. I just want you to say, Kendall, this is a lot right now. Here's a $5 gift card because we live in a small town. Go get your McDonald's biscuit this morning. Take one thing off your list. Just the acknowledgement of it's another thing on the mental load. And, for myself, I have the book launch going on right now in the middle of it. But for military spouses, this is somehow how it works. The book opens up with me talking about, I have a brand new 5-week-old, my husband's deploying. Last week, as I know you have a lot of other authors that listens and writers, my manuscript was due within 2 days of my husband deploying again. And it's just that's how it works, right? With life. And so military spouses, I have friends that find out they're pregnant a week before their husband leaves, or, their husband was supposed to come home last week and now we're stuck in the middle of this week. So again, it's just acknowledging that we're caught in the middle of the suck in a lot of these conversations and times. And we don't have a say-so, and we don't get to.
Well, thank you for being honest with that. I feel like you have a microphone, literally, but also metaphorically, you should be the one speaking into this moment. So
thank you.
I reached out to you initially, my new friend. You don't know we're friends yet, because I think you are full of surprises. And here's what I mean. You're my kind of person with this. So you have great hair, but you get your color out of a box. You wear a lot of Lily Pulitzer and animal prints and hot pink like a boss, and yet you're willing to ask out loud some questions that make people very uncomfortable. If I could design a tattoo for you, and I don't know if you're looking for one, it would say there's more to me, right? So more to me, more to this story of my faith, more to my motherhood. You mentioned your book. We're going to chat about that in a second. More on your thoughts of the world and race and having a unique brain and the way you see the world. So what fascinates me about you, Kendall, is that you are willing to have these conversations online. That is nutty pants to me. You have so much bravery. So what is the cost of being in that space with all of those things? And we're going to unpack a few, I'll untangle some of those knots. But what's the cost and what's the benefit?
I first need to frame this that I'm neurodivergent. I've been open. There's a story in the book about me finally deciding to go on ADHD meds at 27 years old as a new mom, even though I was diagnosed in the 2nd grade, which should send off some red flags for anybody that knows anything about the neurodivergent community, that I, as a woman born in the early 90s, growing up in the early 2000s, was diagnosed in that time period, because for a long time they thought women weren't ADHD. It was a little boy problem for those that couldn't sit still. But now, since that, the one thing I left out of that story in the book is that the doctor's follow-up question was, well, would you like to come back and talk about a potential autism diagnosis? And I shut him down real quick. And I left it out of the book because I've not been ready to have that particular conversation out loud. And I earlier this week recorded a podcast with professional counselor Deborah Felita, and I tell her all about this, and she helps me work through it. But I haven't wanted to talk about it because it's so personal of a story, and I get questions about everything else. No one wants to believe I am who I am to begin with. And to add the layer of I'm autistic, everyone's like, well, you're not autistic. You don't look autistic. But that's an important framing. If you know anything about people who are autistic or neurodivergent, the way I view myself and the way that I perceive the world viewing me and my ability to filter social constructs is very different than a neurotypical person. So my whole life, I have been the little girl asking questions out loud I shouldn't dare even entertain or be sitting at the table at. And I engage in that same way online because my brain quite literally doesn't have that stop motion that says, this might be a step too far, Kendall. I've learned how to meter myself. I've learned how to be conscientious of my audience. But quite literally, I will get physically uncomfortable. It goes back to kind of that soul friction. If I have something I need to say or I'm passionate about or something in society is getting something wrong, it will cause me physical pain and issues if I don't let it out. Yeah. And, I have been doing this online for a long time, but things for me didn't start to blow up until 2020, when my life was starting to blow up at the same time. And so, when you're in those difficult seasons, I think compartmentalization is your way of surviving. And for me, I viewed social media and letting all these things out as a creative outlet, as a cathartic process. I really did not have the bandwidth to even think that there would be a negative to it. And it's been more difficult recently as I pivot into becoming an author that I can see some of the negative sides about it because capacity is so thin when you're writing a book. You're going a mile deep and wide at the same time. It's very personal, but online, it's all day, every day, and balancing those two worlds, and those are the interesting conversations I've had with fellow authors of, I'm kind of taking the opposite approach. A lot of people are authors and then they have to figure out social media. Right. Versus I had social media figured out and then I had to figure out how do I balance becoming an author at the same time and writing and getting deep and sitting in those feelings with days at a time when I've got to act like life is normal on the outside for my content and reasons like that.
Wow. Two of the things that you tackle in your book, and I'm assuming you've done this elsewhere as well, are what you call the 2 D words, doubt and deconstruction. So instead of being spiritual contagions, you say it's not like a virus, those words have actually enriched and deepened your faith. I want to know how those 2 words won you over. Because you're right. In the larger context or larger conversation, especially in like faith circles, sometimes there's even a physical moving back when people say these things. Yeah. And I'd love to hear how the light is just different in the room when you think about those 2 words.
Yeah. Well, what I'll say, the situation I describe in the book, I'm at Awana's, if you know anything about Awana's classes, at a friend's Baptist church, the town over. I myself go to the Baptist church in our town. So I think we're both Baptist. We are both Baptist. It's not I think we were both Baptist. But I realized at her church, the word doubt was approached much differently than at my church. And to realize that as an elementary student made me first realize, one, why are y'all acting like this is scary or bad? While I had trusted adults at my own church that I could have had that conversation with, and it would have been just like any other conversation that we had with scripture or faith. But it taught me the duality of faith very early. I obviously didn't have that verbiage, but that we're all encountering the Bible and Christian culture and what it means to be a Jesus follower very differently. So doubt for me was that separator, the way that I realized, oh, you're having a different experience, that I'm having a different experience, although we're all sitting under the umbrella of Christianity. And then even further down, she went to a Baptist church that was more Southern Baptist. My church is what I now know, didn't know as a kid, is Cooperative Baptist. So those little nuances,
I
but
don't even know the difference of those.
right.
So, okay. Yeah.
But,
But
but
you're saying you thought, I
there's,
mean, a lot of the on paper, you looked like you probably should have the same Awana day.
we should, right. We should have the same experience. We're both Baptists. We're both getting dunked in the same direction. Like it should be the same, but I picked up that it's not. So
Right.
nuance is what I picked up on,
Mm-hmm.
and that was fine. So then 10 years ago, when I first heard the word deconstruction and I was living on the West Coast, it was more of this like invitation to ask questions. And I'm like, oh, I've been doing this my whole life. Y'all have got a word for it. Okay. Like it felt like you're finally putting an adjective to what I've been
Right.
experiencing.
Right.
And I didn't know that it was supposed to be a bad word until a friend, when I was living in Nashville a few years later, who was newer to being a follower of Christ, I mentioned the word and her head starts spinning. Like she starts to
Mm-hmm.
have this visceral reaction because she believed that deconstruction was a slippery slope to hell
Mm-hmm.
and walking away from church, where I saw it as really boiling down to just figuring out, why do I believe what I believe? Do I believe it because I know it's true in my spirit and by God's character and pattern, or because some old person said it behind a pulpit when I was 5 and I just took that as the law?
Mm.
And so realizing that there was nuance early on, I think laid the groundwork for me to understand that deconstruction was not the boogie bear in the closet that we had to be scared to let out.
Mm. I love the way you write about it. I love the way that you're reminding us that the just because there's a fancy hashtag word, this is actually incredibly embedded in all of Scripture. I've been looking at
Yes.
the stories of Jesus recently, and I just talked with another person this week, another author, J.R. Briggs, has a new book about asking good questions and how the way Jesus moved through the world was to ask a lot of questions. He
Yeah,
wanted us to, he modeled it, but he
exactly.
also really wanted us to figure out how to ask some great questions. So
Exactly.
the idea of doing that with a soft heart, I think it's the power move. I think only good things can happen from that. I had an unusual grandma who was, and my mom, both were so ready for me to ask questions. And I remember oftentimes I would say the biggest bomb in the room, like, well, what about this? Especially in college.
Yes.
And they would both be so calm and would say, that is such a great question. And God can handle that question. And it
For
would
sure.
diffuse all of my like, but
The
what? And
noise. Yeah.
what a gift that was to me. I think
Yeah.
we should do a better job of giving that to each other.
Yeah.
Kendall, I am a Midwest girl and I love
Okay.
where I live. I grew up here, left for a decade and returned. I think it's a great place and an imperfect place. And we have picadillos here that we are well aware of. So the folks have problems with passive aggression. So they say they're fine and they're not fine. Or a little forced humility, not being able to ever take a compliment. You like my shirt? Well, I got it on sale for $20. You know, like there's never, we have all of our weird Midwestern things. You are Southern, honey. And I love all the things that go with that. And I'm wondering how being Southern has shaped your faith.
Oh, it had such a layer. I mean, and again, it didn't come from realizing it while I was here in it. It was moving out.
Okay.
You know, when I moved to the Pacific Northwest from North Carolina, the furthest I had ever lived from home was 30 minutes away. And it was like I had been shipped to Pluto. Like I have spent time
It's a
literally
very
in South
different
Africa.
culture in the Pacific Northwest. Yeah.
Well, I had recently spent a lot of time in South Africa.
Okay.
I had no problem with them understanding the words coming out of my mouth. But suddenly, when I'm at the Panera in Olympia, Washington, and I ask for a spicy Thai salad, they look at me like, never once have we had anyone order that in my
The
life.
spicy Thai salad really got him, huh?
Yeah. Or I went through McDonald's, girl, and they told me they didn't have Coke. And I was like,
What?
what? I said, I'd like a Coca-Cola. And they said, we don't have that here. I was like, you're McDonald's. Like you have to have
That's
Coke.
impossible. It's
Yeah, like-
required. What are you saying? They didn't?
No, they did have it, but they couldn't understand.
You
For
couldn't
whatever-
understand you saying Coca-Cola.
Oh, listen, girl. Okay. When I go to the coffee shop, I get the same drink. I'm a basic white girl, and I get an iced white mocha. Do you have Dutch Bros there where you are?
Close to where we are. Yeah. I know
Okay,
what
so
Dutch
you're
Bros-
familiar. You know, they have weird name stuff. It's like the Annihilator. Or
Okay.
like stuff
Okay.
like that. You know, like they don't have normal names. But this poor like 17-year-old guy is like, we don't have that here. And I was like, everywhere has an ice white mocha. And he's like, looking at me, trying not to be disrespectful and not to curse. And if you need to edit this out,
Go
you can.
ahead. You're
But
in a safe place.
he looks right at me. He says, ma'am. Well, he didn't say ma'am. He probably was like, we don't have an ass wipe mocha here. My little Southern 22-year-old like Christian self mortified. You know, I'm turning purple. I'm so pink.
Oh
because
gosh.
this gentleman thinks I have now cursed at him. And so
That's a great story.
The worst part is my husband, who historically his accent is worse, is now trying to like put on a non-accent and like point to the sign, and we finally get my drink. But by the time we get to paying, all of Dutch Bros is hysterical, laughing. They're like bringing people over that asked me to say it again because they're like, we really just had no idea what you were saying. So that's a running joke in my family because, of course, I immediately call home.
That is a great story. I bet coffee has never been quite the same since then. Right. That is amazing.
Well, I'm super cognizant of it now. Yeah. Obviously, every time I'm like, it's an I, not an A. It's an I, not an A. Those are different letters in the alphabet, Kendall. So, you know, have to really think about it. But all that to say is, as thick as my accent is, it is a layer to my whole life. I mean, so if there's clearly a misunderstanding of the way I interpret a word, there's probably some other misinterpretations. I mean, the way I showed up and everybody else is dressed like they're going to go see Nirvana or go hike a mountain. I'm like, it's 7 p.m. on a Thursday. We're at a seafood restaurant. Why do you have an REI bell on? Like, where are you going?
This is the best thing ever. With all respect for our Pacific Northwest friends, it's true. It's true. 7 p.m. on a Thursday, you don't actually need to have like belaying materials on your person.
What, ma'am, why are we are out at a nice restaurant? It's called Shenanigans, and you have your wallet carabiner to you. Like, what do you think's about to happen? And I'm over here in my Lily Pulitzer and Jack Rogers looking like a literal fish out of water. I'm like, it's April. What was I supposed to wear to a seafood dinner?
Oh my gosh, Clearly. This is so wonderful. Oh, that's so great. I almost need an inhaler because of this. I didn't see this happening. I didn't know we'd go to the carabiner. That is wonderful. That's wonderful.
But it's the way it is. And, you know, my Pacific Northwest friends now, like, they laugh about it. Like, they gave me jokes about, they literally wrote index card words so that I could flip them when I was at restaurants as a joke. Because it is so different. But getting myself out of this culture is you realize Christianity and faith was as much as part of my culture as sweet tea and my accent. And so that's a layer of deconstructing, of saying, okay, do I believe this? Or is this part of my culture? Do I believe this, or this is just what we do? You know, and that was like some of those things too that I was figuring out that were different. Like at my church, I grew up doing Lent, and we talked about Advent and followed liturgy.
As the Baptists.
I know. And I've learned on this book tour that was unusual.
Very unusual.
Yeah, I learned to sing the doxology with 2 fingers in my mouth, so I was making sure I was enunciating. But clearly, I did not keep any of that in mind as I talked with other words, just the doxology. But
wait. What? You had 2 fingers in your mouth?
So, yes. So, like, apparently, it's I never have any choral training. Like, this was like in the kids' choir at church. I'll send you a picture because if you really want to throw you for a Baptist
I want to see it.
That's
wore my favorite kind of loop.
Okay, we wore long blue robes with white toppers. I don't know what they're officially called. Think of like what the children's choir sings for the Queen of England. But to add a little pizzazz, we had 22-inch gold chain crosses.
No, you did not. I am not believing this.
Yes.
Wow. Like a little MC Hammer meets the Baptists.
Yeah. Exactly. So, you know, as we sing our doxology we don't sing with 2 fingers on, but it showed us to enunciate and opening our mouth.
Open the vowels. Okay.
Yeah. So,
yeah, you know, I don't think so, Kendall. I don't think that's the average Baptist experience. You were unusual in that. In the South.
Yeah, like,
amazing.
So we are the Baptist church of our small town.
Amazing. Okay. So you did Lent. You did the liturgical calendar.
Yeah. Okay. I knew you could not eat chocolate the 40 days leading up to Easter. At least that was my understanding as a small child, you know, what Lent was. So
Wow.
that, and again, small town, every small town on the East Coast has a street called Church Street, and you go pick your flavor of
Mm,
church,
mm,
Baptist, Presbyterian, not, we don't have Presbyterian in our town, but a lot do, Methodist, Free Will
sure.
Baptist, it's all on one
Okay.
street. Well, in the Pacific Northwest, it is not that way,
No, no Church Street.
and a lot of them are non-denom or Catholic, and, so finding a church and that all was very different. And again, so things that were just very normal churchy things to me, like Sunday school or Wednesday night family night, were things that I quickly realized are, oh, that's like a
It's
cultural thing.
cultural. Yeah.
Not that it's a bad thing, but it's just a cultural thing, or
Hmm.
how we dress when we go to church. Um,
Leave the carabiner at home. You don't
yeah,
bring your carabiner.
no need for a
You don't
carabiner
need
at our
it.
church.
You're okay.
Now, which is ironic to say, because I'm sure my husband takes a carabiner to church, but that
Okay,
goes back to
well,
his
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 job.
training.
Yeah, he has a different
Right.
situation. Yeah.
Exactly. But he'll also wear seersucker on Easter Sunday. If you
Sure.
did that
Required.
on the Pacific Northwest, again, they would think you're in a
Mm-mm.
costume.
Hmm.
It just wouldn't make any sense.
Amazing.
So that has been the interesting conversation that I've been having with friends and with family and um, military spouses. And I use the phrase like we've been cross-pollinated as military spouses, having these little interesting picked up experiences as you moved around.
Mm-hmm.
And you're having to weigh all of that with your faith and also culture. And right now we're such in a weird time with social media where you still have a window into seeing all these other places at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, some of these things make sense.
Mm.
Others do not belong.
Yeah.
But other cultures or other places or, they have adapted these things to be a part of religion or that are necessary and true of faith. But really, it's just the culture that everyone has agreed to in that area
Right.
and isn't particularly true of the Bible or our faith in general. So that has been the interesting part of it too, doing it online is the DMs I get and they're like, oh my gosh, I thought I was the only person that had a weird feeling about that because nobody else is talking about it. But part of Southern culture is if we don't talk about it, it don't exist. Hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. So if we just don't talk about it, it'll go away. But really, you have a lot of women that are built like me. And now too, a lot of women too that are getting late diagnosed ADHD who are natural pattern detectors. Their recognition's popping in and they're like, wait, this also applies to my faith. Do you also feel weird about these things? Or did you pick up on this in 2020? And so we're all coming together being like, we're not crazy,
Yeah.
like screaming at each other. I'm not crazy. You're not crazy. But we've not been given, think in a lot of churches, even 50 years ago, women could hold no leadership position, let alone be pastor. But again, I realized that was unique for me. Women have been deacons at my church my whole life.
Mm.
I've seen women in the pulpit my whole life.
Mm.
Like I didn't know that it was weird until someone told me it was weird.
Mm.
I'm a female deacon in my church right now. I was the youngest ever female deacon chair at my church. It's not going to be weird to my daughter because that's not her culture,
Mm-hmm.
because it's normal to her. But it started making me realize for some of the things that I'm upset with other people about, am I upset because I genuinely believe they believe that? Or am I upset because their culture, their environment has showed them no other option? And, so it is deconstruction. It is pattern recognition. It is all coming to a head with me trying to order an iced coffee drink and no one understanding a word coming out of my mouth.
It's so amazing. That's a very gracious way to paint that because I have not found online spaces to be a very productive place to have conversations like this. And you are proving that wrong over and over. And I'm sure there's a cost to it, but I'm really grateful that you're continuing to spearhead that.
Let me acknowledge one thing. I can get away with it because I look the way I look. I look like every archetype of a Southern woman. I have the lighter color hair. I do the makeup. A comb and a ball of hairspray hates to see me coming. Like I fit the archetype, which to a lot of people gives them a warm and fuzzy or even just familiar.
That's interesting.
Acknowledgement. And then you see my husband's military.
Right.
You see that that we have adopted in our family. And so I've recognized the pattern that has kind of created this safety net around me because there's some level of familiarity or
That's so
safety.
interesting.
And if I'm vulnerable with you about random conversations about my coffee drink or about having endometriosis and the struggles that I've dealt with on these other things, then you're that much more likely to at least entertain or sit long enough to hear me out when I say, this is pissing me off when it comes to faith. When usually they would shut the door or expect me to have blue hair and a nose ring or
Very
whatever
interesting.
weird thing they have in their head.
Right.
So I think because I flip it on the head a little bit or I give off those vibes, it gives me a privilege that, like one of my favorite followers online is Jamar Tisby. And I'm like, he's saying things way better and has way more information, way more knowledgeable and doing the Lord's work. And I have to acknowledge that the reason that I can say it and grow the following that I have is because of the way I look.
That's so interesting.
And that is the point.
That's so interesting. I think you're probably right, but I had not put words to that. So I'm wondering, as you've been doing this online, and you said you've cracked the code of kind of, not that there's not pushback, not that there aren't difficult moments, not that it doesn't cost you, but you've kind of figured that out. You've been in that space for a long time. Writing a book is a little bit different animal, as you said. And nobody really talks, I think, very much about how when we write our own stories, what that will require of us, even if we've worked through those stories. And in your book, which is called This Little Fire of Mine, you tackle a lot in this book. And my guess is that you have worked through a lot of these things and still it costs you differently writing them and reliving them. So purity culture, sexual assault, infertility, grief, loss, all of those places that we visit again when we're looking at a blinking cursor on a laptop, it's like a different offering. It's a different cost. And so I'm wondering, you're a little bit into release season. So far, was the cost worth it, or is the jury still out?
No, it is. I mean, the first time I got the first message of, someone saying, I don't feel crazy, that said, I mean, I'll be real honest with you. I mean, in writing it, my husband nor mother, and I'm very close with obviously both of them, knew about the sexual assault. And I had to tell them that I was writing about it.
They didn't know about it.
Yeah, I'd kept it a secret for that long.
Wow.
And which goes back to a lot of things that I'm now realizing that I need to talk more about in therapy, is that I just have this very much can-do attitude. I can handle it. I didn't need anybody else to handle it. What were they going to do? No one was going to believe me. It was 2012. Like, it was what it was. And on that standpoint, obviously, like my grandmother grieved reading the book, and she's 97, and she cried telling me, I wish I had been there for you more. And I was like, Mama, you had no idea, and you were there. I mean, she lived across the street with me. Her and my papa were my safe place. But it was in recording the book. And I can say this to you as someone who talks to authors all the time and writes herself, the audible recording of it, I was really worried about because I was so emotional writing so much of it. And I was fine. I was fine reading it. I didn't cry till I mentioned my grandfather and the acknowledgments, but it was after reading it, the guy that's producing it from Thomas Nelson, not the audio engineer, he said, I've done over 40 books. And I'm not a practicing believer of any religion. He said, but this is the first book asking the questions and having the conversations I've been desperate to hear someone to say. And he said, as a guy, I don't think this book was meant for me to begin with. He said, but I'm very encouraged about the direction your faith is going. And that was it. I did it in December. And I told my husband, I was like, well, really screw anybody else that reads this book and doesn't get it.
Yeah. Might be just for him.
Right. And for him and for those are the people I feel called to in general. I'm not worried about backlash from the world or community at large. It's been the people I'm closer to, or the people that see Christianity through such a very narrow lens, that are they going to be willing to sit with me in these difficult conversations? And that was the point. Like, there was some pushback in the editing process where they're like, do we want to talk about this or do you want to go there? And I was like, I can't talk about all these other things and leave that out. Because that is going to be the one story that speaks to somebody, that speaks to their lived experience, but they're going to sit through all the other ones and maybe gain perspective. And so it's the yes and is difficult. And I feel like have had to relive a lot to do it. And bring up things that people didn't expect me to talk about. But at the same time, and I don't want this to sound so like how I think of myself, this is exactly what I feel like God has prepared me for since I felt the call when I was 12 to steward these kinds of stories, and there's a grace that has come with it. There's a peace, in all of it. Right now, dealing with my husband's career is much more difficult than having to talk about being sexually assaulted, and so it's just a unique thing because I've had a lot of people, especially from the South, be like, I cannot believe you. I mean, how dare I, a Southern granddaughter, ever air out my dirty laundry in this way? How dare I approach that? But I said, but how many Southern daughters have been hurt, have been broken, and have been shoved into a corner or had to seek help in ways that they should have never had to because we wouldn't talk about it. And now being a mom, I think I just have a different initiative, a different like, oh, hell no, I don't want her to experience that. And I know the love of Jesus. I've never doubted the love of Jesus or God in my life. Everything else we can figure out. And I want her to have that same experience too.
Let's talk about your beautiful daughter, Zadie Ann. She came to you via adoption, and you have had the joy and the struggle of learning to be a first-time mom, along with dealing with complete idiotic comments and feedback regarding the different colors of your skin. I really am I wrote this question, deleted this question several times because I think I'm just so grossed out that we have to say this. I can't believe we're still having to talk about this, but here we are. So here's what I want to know. What are some of the thoughtful ways people in your life have come alongside you and Justin and Zadie as you've navigated a world that just does not seem to want to relinquish the sin of racism? What are some ways? Because I get whipped up. You talked about getting hives. I'm curious about that angle. I'm pretty sure there are lots of ways people have been absolute doinks about this, but are there ways that have been thoughtful coming alongside? Are there things that you know now after being Zadie's mom about how better to come alongside each other?
Yeah. There a phrase that I heard early on, and I don't want to attribute it to the wrong author, but it's not enough to not be racist. You've got to actively be anti-racist. And that was something we learned very early on. And you have to, if you think about the timeline, if my daughter's now 6, when she was a few months old is when the Black Lives Matter movement started going on. Ahmaud Arbery was killed. All of these things were happening as I am now having to confront it at the same time that I'm getting asked, did I get a discount on my baby because she was Black?
Unbelievable. I gasped out loud in this chapter of your book. I had a physical reaction. What? For real?
Yeah. There's
your face, people say these ridiculous things. You're
and
not in prison. You didn't hurt anybody. You didn't punch him in the throat. You did really well.
Yeah, thank you. And that is nothing but the blood.
Okay.
Honest to God. Like that's where it comes in for me. Because I'm sure I'll stare a hole through these people when they say it. But again, you're holding an infant. You're like, what is happening? My husband's deployed. I'm like, it is me, myself, and I. You're 6 feet apart from me. We're supposed to be figuring it out. But they frame it as like, oh, well, like, where did you adopt her from? Like some foreign country or somewhere place. I'm like, oh, she's from here. And they're like, oh, well, my cousin Beth Ann, they adopted. And I know it is so expensive. I've heard that if you get a Black child or a child of color, you get a discount. Did you get a discount? Like that is do you hear how the framing, they think it is a normal thing to say, but I'm like, you're able to say that out loud in clear conscious. There's clearly wires not coming together in your brain. Like someone has never checked you in any sort of way. And so it means absolutely nothing to me when someone says, I'm so sorry you have to deal with that. But that's not followed up by anything. It only means something to me when I know that you are actively calling out racism when you see it. Like when you see microaggressions, whether it's talking about hair, whether it's talking about the way their skin looks or doesn't look or what it reminds them of. It's in the way that you deny some systemic issues that directly disproportionately have problems with black children versus white children that go back 70 years ago. And that has been a very difficult conversation over the last 7 years to the most loving and well-meaning people, even in my own personal life, who again are friends with black people or friends with people of color and are there. It is not the racist people that scare me the most because they're obvious. They're asking the dumb questions. They're the ones saying the ignorant things or saying the clearly racist words. It's the people that is in their subconscious don't see how it still exists that scares me or makes me nervous or makes me feel like, oh, you're not safe. Because what are you going to slip up and say? Like, and I used the illustration in high school that never made sense to me. It was like, it was okay for my friends' dads, some of them, to root for certain ball players. Like I'm in North Carolina. So it was like Russell Wilson, or, you always hear about like Michael Jordan, and you're wearing these men's names on your back as another grown man, which one I think is bizarre in itself. But you would cheer for them, would love to have dinner with them, whatever. Like you think they're the coolest thing since sliced bread. But you would lose your mind and cuss up a storm if your daughter brought one of them home for dinner. And that is your phrasing. Like if they brought one of them home for dinner.
Wow.
And it is those little, again, back to nuance. Like nuance makes all the difference in all of these conversations of like, yeah, you don't say the N word. You would never, make the connection between my daughter and an ape. But at the same time, you make these subtle microaggressions or passive aggressive statements that I'm like, you still don't get it. Like you still don't get it that it's real, or, just like it was in small things like before Zadie was born. We didn't tell anyone other than like my mom and my parents that she was African American because it was a non-issue. Like we were happy to say yes to whatever baby. And we were prepared to do the work for whatever baby, because when you go into adoption, you should see it as a ministry and a lifelong process that you are willing to be the lowest on the totem pole for as the parent. And so the reason I was telling my parents is because I was upset at Target, and this was in 2019. And she's like, what's the matter? I was like, do you know how many Targets and Walmarts we have been to today? And I cannot find one black baby doll. And mom's like, well, I've never really thought about it, but I did, and I was wanting to buy a baby doll for my nephews because they were like 4 and 5 at the time. So they could practice holding a baby. Like it's what my mama did for me when my brother was on the way, just as a sweet thing, and help them get used to being around a baby and introduce them to the idea. And I could not find a black baby doll anywhere. So my mom, being the wonderful person that she is, goes immediately to American Girl Doll, because we were big American Girl Doll girlies growing up, and orders a custom baby doll. Like, we're going to stop this right now. But it was that awareness of That's like, wonderful. Oh, this is a real issue.
Yeah.
Now Target and Walmart, they've done big things with DEI inclusive on some product lines since. Still got a ways to go, but it at least is easier to find. But it's in those things like the accessibility, or when my daughter wants to get a Barbie, does it always have to be the Barbie that looks like me? Like, these things that mean nothing to us that have grown up in a white skin suit our whole lives, that we would have never noticed until it affects you directly. And then with the personality that I have, is like, oh, heck no. Like not only is this making me angry, but I got to do something about it. It's that like my brain, this is back to the kind of autism diagnosis that I'm running from, is that social justice piece is a switch that gets flipped in me. And until I do something and say something and like take action, I can't unflip the switch and unwind and calm down. Because it is, I mean, yesterday there was this, I made a small traffic violation. I was so worried about it. I called and turned myself in about it. I was like, hey, I did this. I don't know that it was wrong or not. I'm not sure. But like,
wait, a policeman didn't stop you? You just knew in your heart? Okay.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Like,
okay.
No, well, it was near the school system. It was near the school. Okay. So like I called the school, like, hey, if there's a camera, you don't have to go looking for somebody.
It was me. Okay.
Yeah. Like my conscience.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Eats me alive in that way.
You have to act.
Yeah. I mean, thank God there were already women in production for making little beautiful black little baby dolls and with different types of hair. Of course, Black women had figured it out long before me. But if it had not been them,
New company.
oh
You're
yeah,
making it.
I was going to figure it out because I was that much on a path.
Awesome. I love it so much.
But we're 6 years in. I've been able to see the progress. Blatant racism, we're calling that out. My small town had a Black Lives Matter parade that I was very proud of. Like just the acknowledgement when people don't give credit to people in the South in a ways that they should. We deal with it every day versus I have a friend in Kansas and she was like, yeah, I went to school with one Black kid the whole time I was in school. I was like, that's crazy to me because like 20 or 25% of my school was African-American and we had a large Hispanic population too. So like that was unusual. That's also where it's like blatant racism has always been wrong in those circumstances, but it's the subconscious, the nuance, like things of like, do you lock your doors when a Black man comes by you at the grocery store, but in the parking lot, but not a white man? Like those little subconscious things that you have to pay attention to within yourself that are like, oh, this was wired in me and it's wrong. But no one wants to acknowledge that,
Well, you are.
I'm trying.
And you're forcing conversation, which I love. Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a final question for you. I asked this of all of our guests. I'm wondering if there's a book that you can't stop recommending. And the reason for that is that I'm always curious about what it's, usually I'm talking with folks who've been thinking about the same thing for a long enough time to write an entire 65,000 word manuscript. But typically those folks are also really inspired by other works. Sometimes it has to do with what you're writing about. Often it doesn't. So is there a book that you've recommended more than once that you land on over and over that we need to read?
Okay. Bob Goff's Love Does shifted my faith on its axis. I know where I was sitting. I wrote on my little blog at the time, like my own interpretation of what I read and how it was shifting my brain. And I reposted it on Twitter because that's when Twitter was big in college. And Bob replied to it and commented on the blog post. The president of the United States could have called me up and it would have meant less to me at that time. That is the book that for years, I can't tell you how many copies I bought, how many times I have gifted it. I have like every version of it because it is such a gracious and kind, compassionate introduction to exploratory thinking when it comes to faith.
That's awesome. Well, that's fantastic. I'll definitely pass it along. He'll be tickled. Yeah. So, although you're already Twitter friends, so that won't be news to him. But well, thank you, Kendall, so much for being here. I appreciate you. I really appreciate your book and the way that you are courageously continuing to see patterns that don't fit. I love your brain. I love the way your brain works. And I'm so glad that you love your brain.
I do.
And for how you are showing your daughter that there are just a lot of beautiful ways to be brave.
Yeah. I'll tell you one funny thing my daughter, as we talked all about her today, guess what character she dressed up with as today for character day at school?
You?
No, that would have probably weirded me out a little bit. She was Bilbo Baggins.
Oh my gosh. Are you spending a lot of time with Tolkien at your house?
Tolkien's always spending a lot of time at our house.
Really? At the tender age of 6, she knows what Bilbo Baggins is. Wow.
Thomas Nelson put out an illustrated version of The Hobbit. My husband reads it every year. Huge Tolkien fan.
Who reads it every year? Your husband?
My husband, multiple times.
Oh, he's one of those.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
So I gave them the illustrated version for Christmas. They've been reading it as their nighttime story. And so I took my 6-year-old kindergartner to school as Bilbo Baggins today.
She might get a couple questions. I don't know that everyone will know right away who she is. She'll have a chance for conversation.
People are going to ask questions and she's prepared to answer them.
I
just thought that would be a good funny note to end on.
You give her a big hug and we support her in her nerdy Tolkien adventures. Our house is in the same spot, though I'm positive no one ever dressed as Bilbo. So that you have one-upped. That's awesome.
A missed opportunity, girl. A missed opportunity.
Oh, thank you for being here.